Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted to reclaim the power of your humanity, then do we have the Golden Sequence show for you. Today I'll be talking with Jonni Pollard, best known for his creation of the One Giant Mind and the Learn Meditation smartphone app, and the author of a brilliant new book, The Golden Sequence. And that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about tapping into Vedic wisdom to break through our toxic beliefs and conditioning and create authentic, loving connections with everyone and everything around you. That, plus we'll talk about sarcasm and Australia. Compulsive painting at age 2, gotcha. From Mr. Resistor to Irresistible, long white beards and Gandalf, Yoda and Luke Skywalker, rainbow-colored glitter crayons, and what in the world dad jokes and the Dalai Lama have to do with anything. So welcome to the show, Jonni. Are you ready to shine?
Oh, yeah, baby.
Woohoo!
Wow, you really did read the book.
I
My
did.
God.
You didn't see it coming, did you?
I'm impressed, man. I'm impressed.
All my love. All right. So before we dive right into things, and I can't wait to talk about skating, but what were your earliest memories growing up in Sydney?
Well, I think my earliest memory was being in my mother's womb, actually. I didn't actually recall the memory until my late teens. But that was the memory, and the memory was being a little bit anxious and a little nervous about feeling like I wasn't going to be able to get out. And then as the memory played out, I remember a really bright light sort of appearing, and it occurred to me that I might have been birthed through a C-section. And I remember calling my mum and saying, "Was I a cesarean birth?" And she was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Huh." I just had the memory of it. I just remember having the memory of the birth. It was fascinating because the recollection of the memory was actually I was having linguistically structured thoughts, meaning that there was language there. Now, I don't know whether I've retrofitted the relationship to what I was experiencing with my current model of reality, but I was certainly very alert, very awake, and I had opinions on things as a baby, which is a fascinating thing for us to consider. So that's my first memory.
Very, very cool. My wife and I, Jessica, she's the producer. We've been in baby making mode here, so we're following just behind you, just on your footsteps. And I've been reading books about babies and consciousness in the womb. And what you're describing has been spoken about now over and over and over again. Not just that babies come in recollecting, but they come in full faculty, and whether they have the words or not, it's not this developmental delay of someday they'll understand what's going on. They come on fully aware and present in their own beingness. There's an I am-edness and there is a me-edness. I am being birthed.
Yeah. Well, our little 5-month-old Safira Devi, there is no doubt about the fact that she is very established in herself and she knows exactly what's going on. And, she's demonstrating a really wonderful sense of humor and the ability to communicate and express love. And there's no apparent language there. There's a lot of gobbledygook, goo goo gaga stuff, which is absolutely adorable. But it's so clear to me that she is having thoughts, feelings, opinions about everything that's happening, who she's interacting with. And, we really need to nurture and treat them with that level of sensitivity and awareness and inclusiveness, like they're little humans having a very specific experience.
I couldn't agree more. So, an early memory that you and I shared is a common expression our mothers would use. In my case, it was Michael. In your case, Jonni. Michael, get down from there now.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I had a lot of energy as a child, and that fortunately was learned how to be directed and channeled. But in the early years, I'm sure you were as much as a handful as I was for my mother.
I have the scars, the stitches to prove it. Yes, poor mom.
Yeah.
So we fast forward a little bit. We get to age 7, and you kind of got rocked to the core, and it kind of shifted everything, maybe out of freedom mode for you.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. Because up until I was about 7, everything was pretty free and boundless. Or unbounded, I should say. I wasn't really um, feeling very restricted by life that much. And by the time I hit 7, I mean, school wasn't that enjoyable for me. I had the revelation in kindergarten that, oh my goodness, I had another 12 years of this, and that created a little bit of anxiety. But
Yeah.
I kind of came to terms with it. But at the age of 7, my parents were divorced, and that had an extraordinarily profound impact on me. That really split my inner world in a way that made life very challenging and complicated, and it began a very powerful journey of learning how to reconcile that split, which has led me to where I am today, really. It was the start of a very big process.
And going forward from there, you got sent as an Anglican attending Catholic school. I got sent as a good Jewish boy attending Catholic school.
Oh, really? Yeah,
Yes.
we do have a lot of similarities in our story, don't we?
They put my locker 4 doors down from the priest's office. And I would actually go hang in the priest's office because I really enjoyed geeking out on this stuff. But then I wasn't allowed to
Yeah.
attend mass or services and stuff. And I wasn't allowed in the specific religious class. So they were letting me know I was a little bit less than each step of the way until I finally escaped, more or less, at age 16 and ran kicking and screaming from the high school.
Yeah. I fortunately got out a little earlier than you. But yeah, it was exactly like that. We were always kind of ostracized, left out of more or less everything that seemed important, and what they held as being the most important experiences and ceremonies. So I can relate to you absolutely. High school, I got kicked out of a high school because I was kicking and screaming, but defending myself in
Oh, there were more
situations.
than a few
There was
fights.
yeah, yeah,
Bullying.
yeah, yeah. It was a pretty remarkable time, actually, which I'm sure you can recall and reflect on and feel in the same way. And so much as that it led me into a much deeper place inside myself that most other kids weren't forced to access as a result of feeling sort of separate and isolated.
Maybe you can share about that because from my experience, and I'm actually what I've done in the reading, it's very clear you were kicked out of the box. And that was actually a very, very good thing because you no longer, it was as if you're Neo and you were kicked out of the Matrix. You saw things as they were. You rejected the current paradigm, but you're also able to see a little bit beyond it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the vision beyond it was always there, but it didn't occur to me that others weren't seeing it, and uh, until at a certain point in time in my early teens. Furthermore, it became clear to me that not only were they not seeing it, but they were so completely entrenched and engrossed in their in their particular worldviews of conformity and involuntary participation in things that just were completely not agreeable to me. Um, so yeah, I was spat out, and uh, quietly grateful for that. In my teens, I was absolutely an outsider and defined my whole identity around that, and that's where I gained my power. However, as I got a little older, I started to realize that it wasn't true power, because actually what I was desiring most was to belong to the world, and to not have these superficial delineations of what makes me different to you determine the way in which I belong in society.
Yeah.
And what I was longing for most was to just to connect with everybody. And my experience was a really simple joy that I wanted to share in. And that simple joy was always complicated by being excluded. And I took it upon myself to work out how I could reconcile this. So as I got to my late teens, and the memories of being isolated and feeling hurt and sad and alone for so many years kind of really bubbled up to the surface. I wasn't able to repress it anymore.
Yeah.
And this catharsis led me into a very deep, powerful, introspective, spiritual journey, which then ultimately led me to India to become trained in, a variety of systems that are more elegant in leading us into the place that we're desiring to not only make contact with, but to stabilize as the normal waking state. And I was very fortunate to be exposed to these teachings and teachers, masters.
I want to dive into that. Before we do, two things took place. First off, you started making a decent living as an inline skater. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
And then secondly, to me, you became a chameleon, which is you became a lead, and I was in drama for a while myself. I never went where you went.
Mm-hmm.
But you became a lead in a hit series, Heartbreak High, and to me, to the world, this means you are at the pinnacle of fitting in, even though the chameleon inside of you is anything but.
Correct. Yeah. It was a very interesting thing. And I made a point of it in the book of spelling that out. Despite the world's, the outside world's praise of my success, it was far from what I was feeling. I felt like I was missing the very thing that was going to provide me with the fulfillment that I was desiring in life. And that was to belong. But in a really, I was belonging on a superficial level within society. I was praised by, society standards of success, and, was hanging out with famous people and going to all the fancy events and all of that kind of thing, being recognized on the street. And all of these things, people would go, oh, that's so awesome and sexy. But it was providing me with no joy, if anything, a little bit of anxiety. Because what I was concerned about was that I wasn't ever going to be seen beyond the celebrity identity. And so I quite quickly withdrew. I withdrew from it all, much to many people's disdain and concern. They were very sort of frustrated and annoyed because I was generating a lot of momentum, and there was a trajectory for me that really had no interest to me, and that's when I went to India.
Well,
and started spending time there.
There's a couple things. First off, the word with belonging, the word that seems missing is connectedness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, connection is in the book, The Golden Sequence. The sequence of our belonging starts with connection, and out of connection, first and foremost, starting with ourself, comes an awareness of a relationship that we are in. Whatever we are connecting with, we are in relationship with, and we are transacting. And what we are transacting is perspective. And as human beings, the thing that provides us with the deepest fulfillment in this life is the recognition of ourselves in others, the truth reflected back to us, which is ultimately that we're all one and the same thing. We are all essentially emergent out of a unified field. And when we can have the experience of that underlying unity through the experience of other that appears separate, there's something quite extraordinary. And within the tradition that I've studied within, this is actually the coveted human experience, is to recognize the underlying unity in the field of separation. And through our unique nervous systems and immense capacity to give loving attention to each other, we are able to transmit our experiences to each other and relay intimately what we're experiencing and share in that. And in that process of sharing, we grow from each other's experiences and perspectives. If we grow in the understanding of who and what we are, first and foremost, the understanding of who each other is in relation to each other, and then we grow in our deep understanding of our innate belonging to each other as, a phenomenon that is expressive of an underlying field of unity.
Beautiful.
Phenomena. Yeah.
So I've got to dive into this before, and this is almost a universal part of the human condition. You're there on your pinnacle. You're doing phenomenally well. Your career has taken off. You've got an inner voice that's tearing you apart. You're extremely judgmental. You're experiencing imposter syndrome. And I think it's because of what you just described. You didn't know who and what we are. Who and what are we?
So I had a sense of it. I did know it. And I believe that everybody does innately know it, because we are essentially knowing beings. That is the hallmark of our beingness. We are human beings, and the hallmark of our beingness is a sense of knowingness about the nature of who and what we are, and what it means to be human. And it's only that we have created an experience or a paradigm of disconnection from the knowingness, where we become hyper-identified with a paradigm inside of our minds that is filled with concepts that aren't necessarily directly connected to what's taking place in the present moment. And when we live in a conceptual paradigm devoid of connection to the present moment, then we live in an obscure reality. It's an obscure reality that is constantly in conflict with the present moment. It's trying to seek resolution with the present moment, rather than utilize the present moment itself and the infinite information and intelligence that is inherent in it. We try and utilize the reckoning of our intellect to reconcile the present moment. And it's kind of like the tail wagging the dog. We're trying to use the mind to control the universe. And rather, what we need to understand is our mind is the universe, and we need to surrender to that and allow the universe to inform the mind of what it is. And, that was what I was struggling with in my teens, as I was trying to reconcile my existence through my mind, through my own reckoning of what I thought I was, who I was. But I had a deep, deep insight and understanding of who I truly was on an abstract level. And that's what, compelled me to go to India, because there was something about that place and the idea that there were thousands of years of records of individuals going on this journey to discover what it means to be human, that I knew I would discover the technology, the pathways that would lead me into the true reconciled experience of who and what I am.
Since you use the word technology, I love this. Let's talk about Vedic technology, what that is, and what's the Vedic perspective of reality. And this is a technology that's been around a little while.
Yeah. Well, the Vedic worldview is that everything within nature is in the physical universe is mechanistic and a technological expression of an underlying intelligence that is non-material. That the atoms and molecules and their relationship and all the forces within the universe, the physical and non-physical forces, the elements, they're all technologies that work together in order to sustain and progress the physical universe. And what drives this technology is intelligence, an underlying cosmic universal intelligence that is inherent in everything, that is all pervasive, and is actually what the physical universe emerges out of. And the technology that I refer to that enabled me to gain access to the truth of who and what I am is just one defined technology that I refer to as meditation, which is a mechanistic process of leading attention into less excited, more expansive, more coherent states of itself in order to yield a broader spectrum of insight and the capacity to reconcile many different layers that may individually appear in contradiction to each other, to be able to reconcile them as one whole field that belong on a spectrum of experience. And the less excited, the more coherent attention becomes. And as our attention becomes more coherent and expansive, it becomes more inclusive of all the things that are taking place in the present moment. And as we can include those and take them in, the capacity to reconcile things that seem so opposing to each other immediately become clearly one and the same thing, just on opposite ends of a spectrum. And there is an instantaneous reconciliation. Now, this starts within the self, feeling so deeply the love for life and the sacredness of our existence, and at the same time feeling such a disdain for things in the world, or a sense of self-loathing or unlovability in some aspect of our fragmented psyche. When we connect with these deeper dimensions of ourselves, and we can lead our attention into that, what we notice is that it's all automatically reconciled. Like a healing of the psyche happens spontaneously by virtue of just exposing ourselves to that deeper nature of expanded awareness. And meditation is the technology that enabled me to have that experience.
Beautiful. And you talk about a crisis today, a crisis of dehumanization, and a big part of it, what I like the expression that you use, we're distracting ourselves to death.
Yeah. The distraction, I believe, is a survival mechanism, a soothing mechanism. But when we use survival as our strategy to exist, as opposed to a tactic to survive, which I believe we have, we've rather than place as priority the mission to thrive, we have placed as priority the need to survive. We've normalized the survival mode, and as a result, what was a wonderful tactic to survive has now become a very, very dangerous path that may lead to our demise if we do not recognize it in time. And a part of our survival mode is to trigger sufficient amount of endorphins in order to override the adrenals that create high levels of anxiety and fear in us. And what we're doing now is distracting ourselves with things that give us very cheap and quick hits of endorphins in order to soothe and satisfy the need to override the adrenaline, the excessive amount of cortisol in the system, in order to make us feel safe and comfortable. Because we need that. We need to feel safe and comfortable in order to feel okay about ourselves. And because the triggering of our fear and anxiety is so deep and so complicated that we don't feel like we can get to the root of it. And as a result, we go for quick, cheap hits of endorphins that then become kind of a compulsive habit, an addiction that lead us into a perpetual state of distracting ourselves from the very thing that we really need to look at, which is what is at the root of our suffering? What is at the root of the discord that we feel inside of ourselves? How can we reconcile that in some sustainable way that is also going to give rise to deep connection to who and what we are?
Beautiful. And I'm going to dive in a minute into the four golden insights. I want to talk about, we were talking about in your chapter, the wisdom in our bodies. You talk about tribes and an evolutionary mismatch.
Yeah. So one of the things that we don't really think about all that often, which as far as I'm concerned is probably the single most important thing to consider when reflecting on how dysfunctional the human species appears to be on the planet right now. And there is a theory called evolutionary mismatch, or mismatch theory, which basically talks about how when a species moves out of an environment that it biologically evolved in for a very long period of time, which humanity did. We evolved as hunters and gatherers for about 1.8 million years. And then about 12,000 years ago, we shifted into agricultural society, where we disbanded our tribes and started living by ourselves. And a lot of other things ensued, include becoming grossly disconnected from the cycles of nature ourselves, becoming disconnected from a sense of purpose that is all about serving the greater good of the tribe. Our identities, our sense of self, derived from our belonging to a tribe and our capacity to serve that tribe to cause it to flourish. And when we disband from that, we abandon the very thing that provides us with our identity, with our sense of self and our connection and our meaning and purpose in life. And we had the convenience of not having to go out and hunt. We could go into our backyard, slaughter a pig, and have that for a while, or pick some of the grain and wheat and things that we grew as a result of learning the technology of agriculture. But that came at a very high cost. And we created a new environment that we did not know how to really adapt to. And that maladaptation has caused what we now refer to as sort of a background distress. Whenever a species shifts from the environment that it biologically evolved into a new one, and it cannot sufficiently adapt, it moves into distress that ultimately leads to extinction. Now, hopefully we have a level of intelligence to avoid that happening, but we're certainly on the path. And the book that I've written, The Golden Sequence, is about addressing what I believe to be the missing link, or a big gap in the understanding of how we reconcile the maladaptation that the human species is experiencing as a result of living in an environment that we didn't biologically evolve into. How do we start psychologically creating the bridges within ourselves to then begin recreating an environment that's going to be supportive of our biology? Beautiful. Which is to belong. Our biology is to belong, and to flourish in that belonging. And our world doesn't support that right now. And there is a huge call to action for us to start creating that belonging. But first, it must start with inside of ourselves. We need to reconcile the dissonance and our sense of disconnection and isolation within ourselves. It's a massive leap that we all need to take. And the book is entirely concerned with that.
And it means that we need to actually, through a technology like meditation, step outside of our smaller selves to see the greatness, to see who our greater selves, what the oneness is that we all are.
Yes, exactly. Which might be a good segue into the Four Golden Insights.
Let's do it.
So I start the book off with what I describe as the four fundamental truths that define our existence. And the four fundamental truths that I refer to as the Four Golden Insights are: life is sacred, which means that as a revelation of our existence, when we remove fear and we are innocently in the present moment, we become immediately aware of the miracle of our existence, the magnanimous magnificence, the size of it, and the immense complexity and intelligence of the universe, and the fact that we exist, and that we can be in relationship with it and be expressive of creative desire and be in union with it to create something. This is the most sacred revelation of our existence. So the first fundamental truth is life is sacred. The second aphorism or golden insight is that love is our nature. When we behold the sacredness of life, the first thing that happens is that our heart swells with love. And I define love as the spontaneous instinct to nurture greater connection, growth, and belonging with all life. And that when we embrace love as our deepest nature, it then gives us a lot of clarity and insight about the way in which we can bring ourselves into the world. The third golden insight is wisdom is our power. I define power as our innate natural predisposition of influence. We are all influencing each other, whether we like it or not. Now, according to our design, which is that we exist in a universe that is symbiotic, meaning that everything within nature is serving everything in nature. We are in a mutually beneficial relationship with everything within nature. The universe is essentially loving itself, and we as individuals have an immense capability to influence each other, to one, nurture each other, and two, to enliven and stimulate the quality of love so that we can be nurtured and supported ourselves. And when we are existing in a way that we are constantly serving the greater good through our loving instinct, our capacity to evolve and progress is immense. And I call that power. Our power as human beings is our capacity to serve with love, which brings me to the wisdom part of it. Wisdom is the way in which love expresses itself. What is wisdom? Wisdom is the way love is expressed. And I define wisdom in 12 facets or characteristics. And these particular characteristics are spontaneously expressive. They are, for example, things like compassion, creativity, enthusiasm, humor, benevolence, insight, discernment, qualities like this that become immediately apparent when we are fully surrendered to our loving heart in service of the sacredness of life. And so we become immensely powerful as servants of nature when we allow the wisdom of love to just flow and flourish through our hearts. So that's the third golden insight. And the fourth is fulfillment is our purpose. Fulfillment, as I describe it, is the experience of love flowing through our hearts with the recognition that we are here to be of service. Fulfillment isn't an externally referenced phenomenon. It's an internally referenced game. You cannot outsource your fulfillment. And this is where I think most of humanity has got it wrong. We are bound by an acquisition mentality, meaning that, we're seeking to acquire things outside of ourselves in order to fill the void of something that we feel is missing inside of ourselves. But actually, when we establish ourselves deeply in the sacredness of life, and we allow the love for life to flutter our hearts, and allow the power of wisdom to flow through us to generate greater connection, growth, and belonging, then we are by our very nature fulfilled. And it's not dependent on anything outside of ourselves in order to have that experience. And then with that revelation, that fulfillment comes through just allowing myself to be immersed in the sacredness of life as a servant of it, then all I need to do is to make that my purpose in order to continue generating that experience of fulfillment and causing it to expand. And so these four golden insights, life is sacred, love is our nature, wisdom is our power, fulfillment is our purpose, they are like a guiding mechanism, a very simple cheat sheet for reminding us of what our humanity is and leading us into the moment with the truth, removing the confusion, the mistrust, the mistake that we are somehow required to be in competition with nature, ourselves, and each other in order to survive. We need to transcend that dialogue, that narrative, and recognize that our highest expression of our humanity comes to light when we're completely surrendered to the deepest desire to be of service.
I want to dive more into that. There's a lot of, as you mentioned in the book, self-help can be a endorphin hit. You read it, you watch the show, you get something, you move on. I'm always wanting people to take action. And so one simple action can be once or twice a day to practice affirming the four golden insights, can't it?
Yes. Yeah. I lay out a wide variety of practices on a daily basis that you can, use sort of a la carte. I prescribe a sequence to the overall practice. meditation being the starting point. Meditation is a very important foundational practice because it establishes sufficient self-awareness for us to not become hyper-identified with the surface level of our experience, which is normally hyper-reactive. And what the golden sequence is itself, and I'll be careful not to jump ahead because I know you've got a wonderful little sequence there in terms of your conversation.
You're good. At this point, I can either help guide you back or just say, you go, boy, and just let you run with it. So go,
right.
Follow your flow.
Okay, great. So when we don't have a regular meditation practice, we lack the internal awareness, which I refer to as witnessing, the ability to observe the fluctuation of thoughts and feelings that can rise and fall, at the click of a finger, at a dirty glance, at someone honking the horn, at the appearance of somebody's name on our phone giving us a call that we know is going to be a confrontational conversation. It can trigger all kinds of things inside of us that can make us lose connection with the truth of who we are. The practice of meditation is technology that establishes vast space inside of us and a deep foundation to the experience of what I refer to as being. Being is you minus your thoughts and ideas of who you think you are. Being is the innocent experience of what you are. And this is the single most important thing that a human being needs to cultivate, is an awareness of what they are beyond their ideas of who they think they are. And we are more of a what than a who. And in that whatness or isness, I
want to hear more about this. More of a what than a who. I love it.
Yeah. So who is more of an identity? It's a construct. It's a set of ideas. They are characteristics that can give us a picture of a sense of individuality, which is all fine and wonderful. It's very important that we're expressive of our individuality. But if that individuality is not backlit by the what, which is the radiance of being, the truth of the intelligence that is the very structure of our soul, the very fabric of our soul. If we're not acquainted with this in some kind of way, then we are going to be very confused trying to define ourselves and operate in the world based on a series of constructs of ideas of who we think we are or who we should be or who we aren't, because quite often we define ourselves by who we aren't as well, leading with our disdain. It can cause an enormous amount of confusion, both in ourselves and other people trying to relate to us. So meditation is a technology that leads us to that place of direct experience of the truth of who we are, where we can bathe in it. We become infused by the radiance of being. And that radiance of being acquires the faculty of identity, the ego. It washes the ego. It clears the distortion from the ego. A lot of people utilize the word ego as a dirty word. For me, it's just a beautiful experience of the self. Now, our ego can be distorted or tainted with mistakes of itself when it hasn't yet fully bowed down to the truth of the self. The ego, the individual self, must become acquainted with the underlying universal experience of the self, which is being, which is always there, always prevalent, always available, if we know how to lead the mind to have that direct access to it. And that's what meditation does. And so...
Yeah, we'll go for it.
No. What was the question you were asking?
Well, it's going to tangent us, which is there are so many labels today on what's a meditation, and so many things that there's no right way to me to meditate, but there are some things that aren't really as meditatey as they seem. So I'm wondering if you can define what is this kind of meditation that can help us understand and give that space to see that radiance of being.
Yeah, sure. So, there are lots of different kinds of meditation, and they all essentially do the one thing, but often serving different functions of the mind. So the one thing that they all do is expand awareness. That's my definition of meditation. Any practice that expands awareness. This can be an eyes closed practice. This can be an eyes open practice. the technique that I'm referring to, I refer to as a being technique because it enlivens being. And it is also referred to as transcending techniques, going beyond techniques. Often they utilize a mantra that has no meaning as such, but has a mellifluous quality that charms the mind into ever-increasing de-excited states, so that the mantra is ultimately forgotten, the mind is led into that vast expanse of being. So I refer to those types of techniques as being techniques. The next technique that emerges out of those techniques is often what is referred to as mindfulness practices, mindfulness meditation, where we are cultivating the first function of the mind to emerge out of being. So I define the mind as having 5 functions, 5 layers to it, which are akin to many of the ancient practices. I've simplified it. There are many, many different layers that can be identified and defined with nuances. But as a broad brushstroke model, we can look at the mind with five layers. And it's quite simply out of the field of being, which is inherently awareness. How do we characterize or define being? Consciousness or awareness. When we as individuals have a personalized experience of being, we are having a personal experience of being alive. And we are able to observe ourselves having that experience. And so what is the primary quality of that first experience? Witnessing. We are able to witness ourselves having an experience. And so witnessing is the first function of the mind. The second function of the mind I refer to as intuitive perception. Intuitive perception is simply the awareness of our spontaneous response to life. When we're observing ourselves being alive, we also observe ourselves spontaneously responding to life. We have an innate instinct, an intelligent response to life, involuntarily. And we refer to that involuntary response to life as our intuition. So the function of the mind that enables us to process that intuitive response is intuitive perception. It's more abstract than the gross level of the mind, which is the next level, which I refer to as thinking. The thinking mind aspect of the mind processes the intuitive perception and then organizes it in some kind of linear conceptual way that we can then organize as a series of priorities to determine what to do next. And then the next layer of the mind that emerges out of thinking from intuitive perception is focusing. So once we determine what is priority, then we focus on that. And then out of focusing comes the fifth and final function of the mind, which is connecting. Once we focus on what is priority, then we're giving our attention to something outside of ourselves or inside of ourselves to connect that concept, to take that intent that emerged from being into witnessing, into intuitive perception, into coherent thinking, into focusing, into delivering that intent for some purpose, some action, some reason and purpose that generates greater connection, growth, and belonging. And so connection can also happen outside of ourselves. But the mind is always connecting. Like right now, I'm delivering a perspective on the nature of the mind, and you're relaying it to your own model. And that's filtering through, your existing model. You're connecting it to your existing model and almost reverse engineering it. And then you're thinking about how it relates to your existing model, and then allowing that to pass through your intuition to go, does this feel right? Does this seem true to me? So there's an enormous amount of process that's taking place there, all simultaneously. Now, while I've delineated the functions of the mind, they're not happening exclusively by themselves and in some kind of linear way. Although we can delineate them in a linear way, they're all happening simultaneously. As the ocean happens simultaneously, we have the surface of the ocean, we have all the layers of the ocean. And so all the different meditation techniques out there, they're operating at servicing or enlivening or enhancing one or more of those functions of the mind. And they can fall into the categories of one of the 5 functions of the mind. It's as simple as that. And that's what we've done with the One Giant Mind Meditation Teacher Training Academy, is that we've categorized them all so that we can understand what they are, their purpose, and the best sequence to practice them in order to unfold the mind's potential in the most elegant way.
If you are starting into this, it's one of the interesting things, and I need to take a survey with my audience of this. I have a feeling we hear meditation, 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 but most people are so distracted and pulled so many different ways. It's much easier to listen to you and me speak than a sense to go into a practice.
Mm-hmm.
Where's a simple door or gateway to begin?
Well, I created an app called One Giant Mind, which teaches a 12-step course in an ancient technique of it's a being technique that moves you into the vast expanse of being, and it trains you very simply and very elegantly. We have this remarkable technology available to us. And, I was always a little bit resistant initially in, taking these ancient practices that are normally transmitted person to person and face to face. But I created a version of it to experiment to see how impactful it might be, delivering, a practice that's similar to these ancient practices via technology. And it's proven to be immensely effective. And so if for your listeners out there, if there's somebody that is kind of knows that meditation's good, have probably had a couple of experiences that were like, wow, that was amazing, that was really great, and I see the value of this, but I just can't get myself to sit down and do it every day, then I really recommend downloading the app, One Giant Mind, because it delivers a technique that is so easy to practice, very gratifying, yields a desirable outcome almost immediately, and is very easy to make as a daily habit because it is enjoyable. It's not arduous. It places all the things like, what do I do with my thoughts, and all of these, questions that we ask. How do I deal with the monkey mind and all of that? All of these questions are answered, but not just on an intellectual level. You're given technique to be able to resolve all of these issues very pragmatically and have a very deep, gratifying experience in meditation.
Beautiful, thank you. So I'm gonna double around. We'll cover just a few more things. The book has so much to it. There's only so much we can cover in this short period. But when we dive into wisdom, and you have 12 different areas, and as I joked and mentioned about in the beginning of the book, maybe you can tell us about friendliness and the first time you met His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story. Um, we were meeting with him to see whether he would collaborate with us in a global experiment of having a few million people meditate around the planet at the same time and have some researchers, scientists study the impact. And he was in the middle of a rare teaching that he offers in Dharmasala at the temple there, and um, we had heard that he was doing that, and that thousands of people had gathered to do that, and somehow agreed to come and meet with us in the middle of giving that teaching, and so we were at the place where you wait for him to come. He came in his car. They parked his car a little bit sort of further away from us, and he gets out of the car like a little child and runs to us, like giggling and clapping his hands, like this,
Yay!
and greets us like a really dear old friend, and he was just so warm and sincere and sweet and enthusiastic and present, and his friendliness was so disarming that you just wanted to, give him the very best of yourself in that moment. You just wanted to just be of service to him in any way you possibly could, because here is this man who has been through the most incredibly challenging things. His people have been, killed and repressed and tortured, and he is, he's living outside of his nation. Can you imagine the anguish knowing that his people are just over the border and experiencing these terrible things. And how do you come to peace with that? And yet here he is touring the world, spreading the message of kindness and compassion. It's an extraordinary thing, very extraordinary thing. And for him to then take an hour of his time, he's arguably the most famous and important human on the planet in terms of what he represents and what he's doing, what he's achieving, the message that he's conveying. And to take an hour out of his time to listen to what we had to say was just overwhelming. And I utilized I could have used him as the story for any one of the 12 ways of wisdom, but I chose friendliness because that was the quality that was just so powerful. It was just so powerful. Yeah, that we overlook. We really overlook the power of friendliness.
So in this story, one of the things you said is he was so friendly, you just want to be of service to him. And that kind of brings us full circle. And toward the end of the book, you actually talk about and I want to know the importance and what this really means. How can I be of service in this moment?
Yeah. Well, our humanity finds its greatest expression in service. I believe that our suffering is generated because we are entrenched in our own defensiveness to survive. And in our defensiveness, all we're doing is considering the needs of ourselves and maybe our family, or the immediate people around us, with little consideration for what I'm doing in this moment that might elevate and serve the greater good. And if we were able to make a paradigm shift from simply only focusing on our own personal needs and often gaining them at the expense of others, shifting from that into, okay, I do have to survive here. There is a way and means by which I can do this. I believe that we've got survival down pat, for most of us anyway, particularly in the West. That question, that might be questionable in certain African countries and other places in the world. But for the most part, most of us have got survival down pat. What we need now is to consider how we can utilize the power of our individuality, to utilize the power of our efforts with whatever it is we choose to do on any given day, with consideration to how it might elevate and serve the greater good. And it's my belief that all the world's problems right now, including poverty, and including inequity of the distribution of resources on the planet, is as a result of this fear-based mentality, this lack mentality, and the survival mode, believing that we have to hoard and hoard and hoard and hoard, ludicrous amounts of things in order for us to feel safe, secure, and powerful. It's a false sense of power to believe that just because you have a domination over resources, that you are truly powerful and that you can control others, that this is some kind of power. This is no real power relative to what the universe is up to. This is a great weakness and a very profound force of imbalance in the world. It's creating a profound imbalance in the world. And what will create the balance in our world is when people realize that their true power is being of service to humanity, bringing whatever wonderful talents and skills that you have only into your local community, even if it's just asking somebody how they are today. How are you today? And really listening, and then just being there to kind of validate their experience and let them know that they're not alone. This is a very powerful way of being of service. But there are so many ways that we as individuals can direct our efforts with the intention for it to serve the greater good. And it's just that simple shift that I believe is going to not only provide people with such a profound sense of fulfillment and happiness and meaning and purpose in their lives, but also it will be the cause of the paradigm shift that we need to see that's going to elevate us into a higher, more sustainable way of existing.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
Since we're talking about tapping into this power, and I am an extremely strong believer, even from a spiritual perspective where we're going, I just want to be free. I'm such a believer in routine and repetition can you tell us the power of a daily practice, and on top of meditation, one or two pieces you recommend so that we can tap in, so that we can remember and set intention on a daily basis?
Yeah, of course. So, the book is filled with it. And at the end of the book actually provides a really powerful daily practice that if practiced as I prescribed will cause transformation in a very short period of time. This includes waking up in the morning, greeting the sun, acknowledging that we exist in a universe, that we're on a small blue planet that's hurtling around a orb of fire at 66,000 miles per hour. Just to conceive of that for a moment, just to connect with the reality of that on a daily basis, and then to do some movement to serve the body, just to get the body moving in some way, and then to sit and to nurture the mind and the nervous system through meditation, doing a quick little meditation. Only has to be 15, 20 minutes. Twice a day, I recommend, morning and evening. It's always best to reset and recover from stress. To make sure that you eat well, to eat clean, fresh food that hasn't been interfered with chemicals and other things. Then to go into your day with the intention of remaining connected to that desire to want to be of the most significance and relevance to others, staying in the heart and just remaining connected to that. And then making it an absolute priority that you connect with someone every single day on the level of the heart and listen to their experience and share your heart with them. Share your heart. Always be in connection with the heart, whether it be your partner, your children, work colleague, stranger, whatever. Have a heartfelt connection. Do not go to sleep on a daily basis without connecting with somebody from your heart, because this is what reminds us of what makes us humans, is that we are heart-based knowing beings, and we need to share our sense of knowing, of our loving nature with each other through our hearts on a daily basis. And if we don't, we become ill. And so, and then I go on. There's many other little things.
You've got dirty laundry in there.
Yeah, so you've got to launder the buildup of the stinkiness of stress in the system, and the way that we do that is meditating. Actually, meditation is the most powerful way to create the sufficient amount of rest that the body requires in order to recover. The only antidote for stress is rest, and we need to rejuvenate. We need to slow down, look after ourselves, not burn ourselves out, and we all need to hear that one.
Yes.
And get a decent night's sleep, and wake up fresh every day. These are just the simple little things, and if we're taking care of all of that, nature takes care of the rest. The power of our innate desire to be of service, to love, to connect, it all just naturally emerges when we remove the obstacles that are in the road. And generally, it's just stress that's the obstacle.
Thank you. Jessica, my wife, the producer, she always wants me to ask a question for parents and their kids. Since you have a 4, almost 5-month-old traveling around with you, what advice would you give parents to help their kids today?
To embody your highest quality as a person, because your children are modeling you. We can teach our children things, but if we are not practicing them themselves, that has no real value, because they do as we do, not as we say. They model. The brain models off our own states of consciousness, and there's incredible science now understanding the power of mirror neurons and how children's brains are developing just mirroring what we do. And so we need to embody our highest qualities. We need to be dedicated and committed to that. Second to that, as parents, to demonstrate to your children what it means to be in a loving relationship. Be openly affectionate with your partner, in front of your children, to show your children how to resolve challenges, differences of opinions, be exemplary in the way in which you, you know, work through a difference of opinion or a difference in perspective, and allow the children to witness that. Because most of the time parents will go, your father and I just need a moment, or your mother and I just need a moment, can you please leave? Is allow them, as long as the issues aren't going to be frightening to the children, allow them, if you have developed the skill, to demonstrate how you resolve a difference of opinion and perspective harmoniously. And because that's one of the most important things that kids need, is to know that there is a way, despite there being a difference in opinion, to be respectful in other opinion and go through a process of understanding that, and then finding a middle ground, establishing a middle ground in our relationships. And so they're just, this is going to be the subject of a book that's going to come later. What the role and responsibility of parents, and it's more about what parents need to do within themselves, more so than what they do with children, because children can pretty much grow up very effortlessly and easily if they're modeling a whole healthy adult. It just happens quite easily and automatically. Yeah.
Shifting from there, a few last wrap-up questions, then we time for a very brief meditation. What personally brings you the greatest happiness, or what I call the woohoo factor?
Now I'd have to say interacting with my baby girl. Yeah. Her smile, the way she just looks at me from that place of infinite wisdom. She is in that pure state of love, and when she smiles, she lights up. It's just, and it goes boom, so deep into my heart, and it bypasses anything that might be happening, and floods me with a sense of love for her. And that's some serious power that she has. So I would say that, and my relationship with my wife. Yeah,
beautiful.
Those two things.
She's got you. Both of them have got you.
Yeah, they have indeed.
Where can people go to find out more and to find your beautiful book, The Golden Sequence?
They can go to jonnipollard.com.
Yep.
There it is, folks. jonnipollard.com for the book, and to find out more about me and what I'm up to. You can go to One Giant Mind, that's the number one, giantmind.com, to find out about our smartphone app to learn to meditate. Now, if you're a passionate meditator and want to bring that passion into the world, we have a meditation teacher training academy where we train passionate meditators to become embodied leaders. And you can come and take our training. It's remarkable, and we'll train you in a really powerful method that transforms people's lives. And you can be teaching as early as 3 months from starting the training. It's a 1-year training that evolves from there. And you can also listen to the One Giant Mind podcast, which is my podcast. And yeah. So I'd love to talk to you more about that later on.
Very cool. All right, so let's go through this. If you didn't catch Jonni Pollard, JonniPollard.com, and one, that's the number one, giantmind.com. Come on over to inspirenationshow.com, and we'll get you over to JonniPollard.com and onegiantmind.com. Before we dive into a brief meditation, any last words of wisdom, Jonni, you want to share with people today?
I just want to say thank you to you. You're a diamond. I really appreciate the fact that you've spent so much time reading my book and really considering how you structure this interview, and you're doing a great service to the world. And it's just so nice and refreshing to be on the receiving end of your enthusiasm, your sincerity. It's so clear that you're so passionate about what you're doing. And it's beautiful, and I'm just very honored that you've invited me onto your show. So, thank you, and you're an absolute sweetheart.
It goes both ways, and so you've got, for people who can't see it, you have this giant, beautiful painting behind you that is, to me, it's both like the sun and it's all the colors of the rainbows combined. But what I see most behind you as you're saying this is, it's a giant I don't even know what the term is for it, not like a lollipop, but a giant candy on a stick. And talking with you and reading your book is like candy. It's awesome.
Candy that doesn't give you that yucky sugar high that you come down really hard from.
Amen. Well put, Jonni. Well put. So would you have time for a very brief meditation?
Indeed, yeah. Let's do like a 60-second reset.
Okay. And if you're driving down the road, do this afterwards.
Yeah, you need to pull over. Actually, it'll probably be a 2-minute reset.
Perfect.
Let's call it a 2-minute reset. Okay. So what we always do to reset is close the eyes, turn the attention inward. And the best way to assist in transitioning from eyes open to eyes closed is just take a nice deep breath into the belly, and then further breath up into the chest. Hold. Allow the air to fill the lungs, to stretch the lungs, and then release through the nose. And as you allow the breath to settle, just scan the body for any tension you might be holding onto. Let go of the shoulders, the hands, the lips, the tongue. Just completely let go. And bring your attention into your chest. Notice the soft, gentle flow of breath that's just naturally happening as the chest rises and falls. Moving a layer deeper into the level of feeling, connecting with how the heart is feeling. Without trying to change what you're feeling, just be totally accepting whether it's gratifying or ungratifying, open, free and light, or tight, constricted and worried. Just be totally accepting of what's happening inside the heart. And in this process, what you're allowing yourself to do right now is move beyond any belief that you are trapped in any experience you're having right now. The simple act of being here in your heart is the way in which you allow yourself to break free from any idea that you're trapped, that you need to be worried or anxious about. The longer you can stay in this space, the better. But sometimes all it requires is a couple of minutes of just innocently being with your awareness, allowing the breath to rise and fall in the chest, with the awareness in the heart. Coherence flows from the heart. And all you need to do is allow your attention to be there for a moment to stimulate and awaken that coherence. And if you only have a couple of moments, then just acknowledge that you have the power to stop at any time and reconnect with yourself and reset. And all it requires is this. And so whenever you're ready, very slowly open the eyes. And then you're reset to continue progressing. I'm looking at Michael, and he doesn't want to come out anytime soon. He's in the zone, baby. Nice. You went there. That's great, man. Yeah, that's a really simple exercise that anybody can do at any time, that just really brings you back into the moment.
Thank you, Jonni. This has been phenomenal. This has been really fun.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it too, mate. And thank you for your patience and me being a little late, dealing with some tech issues.
It's all perfect. It's all perfect, just as it is.
Great.
So, got to crank it up for the finish here. I'm still in. I'm still under. For everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get the golden sequence, and begin reclaiming your humanity today and shine bright. Woohoo!
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you so much, Jonni.
pleasure, mate. Thank you. Really, really appreciate the time that you took with me. Really, and making a little background and having the book, reading it, everything, man. It's great. It means so much to us authors that, spend a lot of time writing these books. If everybody was like you, I'd do podcasts, all day long.
I get it, and thank you. And if everybody was like me, I guess I'd be out of a job, but that'd be okay because it'd be service. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!